European history, for example, almost all of them actually, until the 20th century, have been about religion. So you couldn't begin to understand the Middle Ages without religion. You can't understand Shakespeare without religion. There are all sorts of parts of our education which would be meaningless unless you teach about religion.
Louisa, just briefly, can I ask you what reaction you get from parents who are believers when you teach their children what you were just explaining about atheism and when you indeed cite the books that you were talking about?
Yes, of course. I mean, as I say, I give a very wide and unbiased approach to the issue, but I think parents are delighted that their pupils are able to, and their students are able to engage in different varieties of material. The issue of atheism obviously is something very important, but I hope that Professor Dawkins acknowledges that there is room for all religions and the discussion of such God in the curriculum. So that's the most important thing for my pupils to learn about.
Okay, Louisa, thank you very much indeed for your comments and questions.
Thank you very much indeed. I very much appreciate your answer.
Okay. Let's go to our next caller on the line from Hong Kong, David Witten. Your question to Professor Richard Dawkins, please.
Hi there, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi there. My question to you is this. As a scientist, Professor Dawkins, I'd like to ask you, well, basically, I agree with you. Science does explain the world better than religion, for sure. But what science and religion, and I think particularly monotheism in that department especially, have in common, is they're both based on and use the process of thought and conceptuality. And my question is, what is the understanding, for want of a better word, that we used to seek through religion, and many now do so through science, is actually an experience and not an idea or a concept?
I don't know what that means. An experience and not an idea or a concept.
Can you just explain a little more briefly, David Witten?
Sorry?
Can you just explain that a little bit more, expand on that a little bit more?
Professor, I assume you'd agree that religion and science, well, science is looking for some kind of understanding or explanation of the world. But maybe the understanding or reason or sense or something that we're looking for is not an idea or a thought, it's actually an experience.
Well, I have to say again, I'm not sure what that would look like. I seek to understand. I seek to get a picture for why we're here, what life is about, where the universe came from, where the world came from, where life is going, all those sorts of questions. And experience, well, of course, I have experience of life, but I don't know what it would mean to say that experience is what religion gives you.
Well, I don't mean religion per se. I mean just like as an individual, of course, we will experience life all the time. We have different thoughts and ideas, and when we look inside ourselves, we can see how the thought process and the process of ideas and conceptuality actually work. But maybe those things internally aren't good enough for like grasping what maybe life is, and like I say again, for actually experiencing maybe accurately what it is.
I have nothing to say.
But it is, well, it is the case, isn't it, Richard Dawkins, that in a way, God and science, religion and science have become seen as more compatible by many scientists. They've become more open, if you like, to randomness, even to improbability, not claiming to have answers for so many things. There's been a shift, has there not?
There's a tremendous difference between saying that we don't have all the answers and saying that therefore religion does. Of course science doesn't have all the answers, science is working on it, but to the extent that science doesn't have all the answers, and of course it doesn't, what on earth makes anyone think that religion does?
Okay, David Witten, thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's go to an email that's come in while we've been on the air from Singapore, from Carl Brunez, who says this: can't we assume that we won't find the answer to the question of whether God exists, at least as mortals on this planet?
Yes, I think we can assume that we won't find the answer to the question whether Baal or Zeus or Jupiter or Thor or Mithras exists.
Right, he goes on to ask, is there really any point in discussing the issue besides that of entertainment value?
I think there's a very good point in discussing whether there is some kind of supernatural creator in the universe. I think it is a very big question. I think it's a supremely big question, and a very interesting question, and I think that all the evidence points to the answer no. I don't think it's a futile question just because you can't give an absolutely definite answer. I believe you can probably give a probability answer, and that the probability will turn out to be very low.
Okay, let's bring in our next caller, who is a Conservative MP here in Britain, Mark Pritchard. Your view of Christianity, really, and its place in the world, the strength of its beliefs in the light of what Richard Dawkins has been saying today?
Well, I'm glad Professor Dawkins used the word probability there. Reading his book, God Delusion, you would perhaps think that, one of the great questions of the universe had been answered, one of the ultimate questions, and of course we know that it hasn't. And Professor Dawkins, I think, would be the first person to admit that when weighing evidence in science, and he's one of the preeminent natural scientists of the world, that one judges probabilities, not proof. So there is no proof that God does not exist.
I fully accept that there's no proof that God does not exist. You presumably accept there's no proof that fairies do not exist. It doesn't mean that you think it's the slightest bit likely that they do.
Well, I think, and you're referring to your own, what you call, I think, the infantile theory, that when we're all young, we put our sort of teeth under the pillow and perhaps get 50 pence in return. And yes, as children, we do believe in all sorts of fantasies and fairy tales, such as Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. But there is a problem with that particular proposition, and that is, of course, there are many people that grow up and they then discard their views on Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. But there are many people that grow up into adulthood, having been atheists in their teenage years, who then find faith in God. So I'm afraid that theory isn't consistent.
Well, Richard, to come in, Richard Dawkins, you, I gather, are concerned about something you call Christianophobia. You believe that religion in this country is under threat. Is that right?
Yeah, the debate I tabled in the House of Commons this week, Christianophobia, was not a debate on religion per se, but it was really saying that there is increasing feeling amongst people from the Christian tradition that many of the main Christian festivals and traditions such as Christmas and Easter are being often sidelined and marginalized, sometimes by stealth, sometimes openly. And I think this is a mixture, a combination of the sort of politically correct brigade along with fundamentalist atheists and militant secularists. And I just think that unless mainstream political parties stand up for the Christian traditions of this nation going back to the 1st century, then unfortunately those traditions will be hijacked by people in extremist parties such as the BNP. And also I think it's wrong that fundamentalist secularists should suggest that other, or even politically correct people, suggest that other faiths are offended by Christian traditions. That is not true. I've never met a single Muslim, Sikh, Buddhist or person of any other faith that has objected to the Christian traditions of this nation.
Mark Pritchard, thank you very much. Richard Dawkins, briefly, I mean, there is a problem there, isn't there? You might not believe in the traditions we're talking about here, but if they are done away with, if they are very severely challenged, it can be destabilizing for a society.
I agree. I mean, I'm not one of those who wants to stop Christian traditions. This is historically a Christian country. I'm a cultural Christian, the same way as many of my friends call themselves cultural Jews or cultural Muslims. So yes, I love singing carols along with everybody else. I'm not one of those who wants to purge our society of our Christian history. If there is any threat to those sorts of things, I think you'll find it comes from rival religions and not from atheists.
Okay, let's go to our next caller, Alan Riepsamer in The Hague in the Netherlands. Your point, please.
Hi, Mr. Dawkins.